G'day expats and welcome to another episode of Expat Chat, episode 116 today. And we're back regular, weekly, like the Milkman and the Malman. And today we're going to talk about who an expat can nominate as a beneficiary of their super should the worst happen. And we're seeing a lot of complications with this. But before we go any further, let me do the needful, as we say here in the Middle East, and introduce my the gentleman who's the host with the most, Mr. James Ridley, sitting to my right, everyone's left. James is the Managing Director for the Asia Pacific region, specialist on the US, and top mate and business partner. G'day, James.
Gosh, Brett, with an introduction like that, how do I go on? How do I carry on?
Mate, walk side by two doors.
For those that are joining us, you would have heard the silky smooth voice of Brett Evans, the founding director of Atlas Wealth Group and now the managing director of the Europe, Middle East, Africa's region. He is still drying himself off from all the floods of recent in the sandpit. How are you, Brett?
I haven't got web feet, but everything else is mending accordingly, which is good.
That's right. And mate, jumping into today's episode and discussion point, we have seen a lot of confusion around this topic because I'm seeing a key theme where people just don't know what they can actually put down on the form. So we'll do a bit of a deep dive. We'll deep dive into it a little bit today. I think we need to get the jingle out of the way in terms of a bit of a disclaimer. So I'm going to kick it back to you.
Mate, all the information that we're going to espouse and pontificate on today should be treated as informational, educational purposes only. Do not treat this as personal advice. If you do need to get personal advice, reach out to specialists like Atlas.
Absolutely, mate. And kicking into it, a binding death benefit nomination. It sounds pretty official, doesn't it? Very formal. And it's commonly something we need to actually fill out or complete when we have a superannuation fund. If you do have a super fund and you've actually never logged in or nominated a beneficiary, it is definitely something you should look at doing, because if something happens to you, that form, that nomination, that governs where your super is going to go in the event you pass away. And it's really important, especially when we have even life insurances attached, or I guess different insurance types, but mainly death cover attached to our super fund as well, because that actually helps govern where those life insurance proceeds are going to be paid out as well. It's often something that's forgotten about, especially for a lot of Australians. Might not be paying too much attention to their super, but doesn't mean they can't pass away overseas.
Mate, you're spot on. And we see this time and time again. It's not even on the list of to-do. It's just so pushed down. And the amount of times I meet with couples here, certainly face-to-face in the UAE, and we're doing a review of their super, which is one of the big things we do. There's 40 odd questions that we ask super funds, 20 of them expat specific. And when I say, oh, by the way, are you aware that your parents are your nominee? And quite often when they had the initial fund set up, they were single. So they had no one else to nominate their parents. And it's funny, since then, the account hasn't been updated, and now they've been married and they've got kids and stuff like that. And the partner looks at them and goes, your parents are going to get your money? It's always that sort of, well, that's why you need to do your homework. And, I think that's, you just can't appoint anyone. And what we'd love to do today is do a bit of a deep dive just in terms of who you can and can't nominate, and also the different types of nominations. I mean, there's non-binding, there's binding, there's lapsing, there's non-lapsing. So let's just sort of break those apart first with the binding and non-binding, and then we'll go into the lapsing and non-lapsing and specifically which people can you nominate.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. I mean, it is a bit strange that there is binding and then non-binding, because what's the point? But I guess it's almost similar to a letter of wishes when you have an actual formal will or estate plan. It's encouraging the super fund that's where you want those monies to be paid out. But if they were ever challenged legally, because it isn't a binding death benefit nomination, mainly a non-binding, then again, it's mainly encouraging the super fund that's where your proceeds would go. And then depending on the type of beneficiary that is, that's going to flow down and have obviously different tax implications, but there will be obviously the proceeds there. So when we go back and have a look at, we've got non-binding and binding. Binding is very official. You are making a legal binding representation or nomination there. You're actually also going to have witnesses that are going to sign off of that. And when we look at binding versus non-binding, Non-binding is usually actually a bit more of a shorter form where you
Yep.
don't need witnesses because, again, it's not you're not necessarily making a legal contract or anything like that. It's just encouraging the super fund. That's where your superannuation proceeds would go in the event of your death. But then we also have binding, non-lapsing, and then binding, lapsing. So I'll kick it over to you, Brett, in terms of those two.
Yeah. So, and whether you do non-binding, binding, lapsing, non-lapsing, it will depend on your super fund. Not all super
Yeah.
funds offer a whole suite. The lazy super funds just offer you a non-binding. They want control in terms of the say.
Mm.
A good super fund will give you control as opposed to
That's
take
right.
it away from you. So we've got binding non-lapsing, which means that once you sign that document, unless you rescind that instruction, it's valid in perpetuity. And
Yep.
then you got binding lapsing, which is normally a period of 3 years. And a binding lapsing nomination is essentially for the next 3 years, this is what I want to happen. And then I will review and resubmit a new form to re-engage whatever wishes you want. So
That's right.
as you can see, there's a lot of little silos there where, a lot of people, I guarantee, if I wasn't doing this for a job, I wouldn't have a clue what it means. But, and you can understand why there's confusion there. So I think we've nutted out the structure of the nomination. Binding, non-binding, lapsing, non-lapsing. Let's just now go to that next level of who, as in physiologically, who can you nominate to receive your super benefits?
Yeah, I mean, there's, I guess, different classes of beneficiaries, I guess you could call it. And the easiest is that there's definitely going to be two, which are the easiest to nominate as your beneficiaries. But again, a lot of people do get them wrong. First and foremost, the easiest to nominate as your beneficiary is your spouse. Absolutely. No issues there at all. And when you are making a nomination, you can actually nominate different percentages. So you can say you might go 100% to your spouse in the event you've got no children, and that's all you want your super going to, and that's it. You can also nominate children. And if you were going to break up your super to your spouse and children, well, that's when you can put down 50% to your spouse and 25% to Bobby and 25% to Billy, and then off you go. So those are, I guess, really common beneficiary nominations. There are some others though, and there's often a bit of confusion there of who you can put down. And I'm going to kick it back over to Brett in terms of some of the mistakes we see, which he actually just gave us an example on.
Look, and just touching back on your point before, there's actually leverage you can use with the kids for those out there who do have kids. I call mine cost center 1 and cost center 2. Just tell them, if they're being a little turd, okay, great, you're off the list. I'll give it to your sister. And they look at you, they still don't understand what super is, but I plan to get there. But look, when it comes to who you can and can't, give it to, there is a bit of a grey area around the fringe. But if you want something unequivocal and just rock solid, there's essentially 3 options you can do. Number 1, as James said, partner, spouse, de facto. Number 2, it's your financially dependent children. And number 3 is someone else who is financially dependent on you. So it doesn't have to necessarily be a child or, a relation, but if they're financially dependent on you, you can certainly nominate them. Number 4 is what we call legal personal representative. So that's essentially, if you don't want to go into this deep dive now, but you have a will in the background, you can say 100% to legal personal representative, and the executor of your will then follow your will and divide up your super as you've nominated your will, as opposed to in a binding death benefit nomination form. So essentially there's 4 actually, but there's 3 real people you can nominate. We often see brothers, sisters, parents in those forms. Those are just going to cause unnecessary delay and confusion and friction should you pass away. And you can't guarantee whether it's up to the trustee. If it's not a valid declaration, it's up to the trustee then to work out who is the rightful recipient of your super should you pass away. So it's a bureaucracy. Guess what? It takes time. So there might be that drag out. And these things are important to make sure that you do have everything nutted down in terms of, to the D, because I mean, obviously you passing away is a pretty sad event and people are not feeling the best about it. The last thing you want to do is cause them unnecessary grief. especially if you said to your wife, yeah, you're on my list, and in actual fact it goes to your parents, and she's dealing with the loss of you and dealing with the kids, and to find out she's not getting the money. I don't want to be flying that wall when that happens.
No, no. But when when you think about superannuation and by making a binding nomination, if you're leaving it to, I guess, your spouse, your de facto, you're immediately actually taking that asset out of your estate. If you're making a binding nomination on your super fund, that means it's not going to make up part of the will. If you've also got something in your will that says, hey, my kids get my super, but you've got a binding nomination on your super fund, well, the super fund is now not an estate asset. It doesn't matter if you put in your will, you've actually got that binding nomination on there. So I think there can also be some confusion there in the event when you might have engaged maybe an estate planning solicitor in the past. You need to make sure that what you've got on your super in terms of your beneficiary nomination actually stacks up against your will and it makes sense and there's no conflicts there. Often if you're unsure, I think a common one will be, letting your will take care of it. You'll nominate the legal representative and then within your will or your estate plan, a common type of trust that gets created is called a superannuation proceeds trust. And that's a really good vehicle under your estate plan because it helps reduce taxes when your assets are all getting wound up and getting paid out to your beneficiaries. So really important to give that some thought, especially if you've never given it any thought and you want to actually maybe look at getting a formal will or estate plan in tax rather than trying to nominate your parents as the beneficiaries on your superannuation account, because that's not a thing.
Exactly. And I think that's the, super's a thing when you live in Australia, and people are reminded of it daily through advertising and that sort of stuff. They're not reminded of this stuff. When you go overseas and become an expat, it's a figment of, one email you receive once a year with an annual statement. And it is just a tiny modicum of your life. But as you can see, make the wrong choices, do the wrong paperwork, can cause all sorts of, disruption, pain, delay, anxiety, for who you want to receive your money. It may be, drawn out for months, if not longer sometimes. Should the wrong person be nominated or the wrong form be completed, it's not so cut and dry. So we just want to jump on and just sort of run through the folks and say, hey, this is a thing, and it affects pretty much everyone because pretty much everyone's got super. So this is not a rich person's or a poor person. If anyone who's got super, this is a thing. So, I'd recommend you drag out, either log in if you can, and look who your beneficiary is nominated as. It'll be on the website. You should be able to see it on your annual statement too. They have to, by law, remind you who you've nominated. And in there, you'll see these words that now you know what they mean. Binding, non-binding. You know what the context is. Have a look. Is it binding or non-binding? Is it lapsing, non-lapsing? Who's the person? If it's a friend or a family member who's not direct dependent, then you might want to update that and save any further grief.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I reckon you're right. There'd be a lot of Aussies that are overseas, got old super funds, and they probably have nominated people, which maybe ex-partners that they're no longer with. And
you just took the word out of my mouth. I was going to mention that. I actually had a client do that.
Yeah, and they're going to come across and go, oh shit, this ex-partner's going to get on my super, I pass away. Maybe I should pay some attention to it because that super is probably still going to be invested for another 20 or 30 years. And by then it could be actually a large amount. Whereas by then you've got kids, you've got obviously a new spouse, new partner, de facto, whatever it might be. It is definitely worthwhile giving some attention to it because, again, you can make a binding and non-lapsing one, which means it covers you. All good.
Yeah, this particular client owes me a beer because rather than making that statement in the statement of advice, sort of caught him on the side and said, look, we're doing a review of your super and I noticed a name on there that doesn't look familiar. My gut tells me it's a former partner or a girlfriend or someone. But I don't want to throw you into the shit. So he's like, yes, thank you. He's like, I had no idea that she was going to get that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We will roll it over and do this one.
You might have discovered something else. Says, hey, what date was this nomination, mate? Oh, no, we're all good. We're all good.
That's right. Well, mate, I think we wrap it up there. You can only talk about these topics. They're a bit dry, but hopefully we'll provide a bit of levity to it, get everyone through the call. But mate, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thanks everyone for listening and watching. Thanks for all the reviews. Just another shout out too for the Australian Expat Financial Forum, the Facebook group. There's a lot of activity going on there. Obviously conversations regarding budgets and residency rules and investing and all that, property, mortgages, everything is there. So, chuck into the Facebook, banner at the top there, Australian Expat Financial Forum, jump on board. I think there's almost 3,000 members now, so it's quite a big crew. And any questions, we'd love to hear from you down below. There's a link where you can submit your questions that we can answer on the call. And mate, I'll let you get on with your afternoon/evening. I'll get on with my morning, and we'll see you folks in the next episode.
Sounds good. Thanks, Brett. Thanks, guys, for tuning in.
Thanks, guys. Take care.